Hello. Feel free to relax, and we hope you have a soothing sleep. This first story is one of Iron Man's very best comics. Tony Stark, once a carefree billionaire, now lives in a world shaped by responsibility and burdened by the consequences of his past. He can never fully escape his legacy as a weapons manufacturer, a legacy that continues to haunt him no matter how many lives he tries to save. It's early morning, and Tony wakes up in his luxurious penthouse, nestled within his vast technological empire. The view from his window shows a bustling city, but Tony's mind isn't on the skyline or the wealth and success that surround him. Instead, his thoughts drift to darker times when Stark Industries was synonymous with destruction, not hope. The room around him is sleek, filled with the most advanced technology known to man. His workshop, attached to his private living quarters, is a shrine to innovation. It's here that Tony tinkers with new designs for his Iron Man armor, constantly upgrading and pushing the boundaries of what is possible. But as impressive as his creations are, there's a part of Tony that feels trapped, as though all this technology, no matter how advanced, isn't enough to truly address the problems he faces. Tony is not just a man in a suit of armor, he is the armor. The boundary between Tony Stark, the man, and Iron Man, the hero, has blurred over the years. The responsibilities that come with being a protector of the world weigh heavily on him. His days are filled with constant reminders of the dangers lurking in every corner of the world, dangers that he, more often than not, feels responsible for in some way. His technology helped create these threats, and now it's his duty to stop them. In the midst of this constant internal struggle, Tony's world is about to change in a way he could never have anticipated. Across the country, in a nondescript research facility just outside Austin, Texas, something extraordinary is happening. Dr. Maya Hansen, a brilliant scientist whose intellect matches Tony's own, has been working on a revolutionary new project. Her workspace is modest compared to Stark's high-tech lab, but the implications of her work are anything but. It is here, in this secluded facility, that Maya has developed something called Extremis, a technology so advanced, so powerful, that it could change the future of humanity forever. Maya Hansen is a complex figure. Years ago, she and Tony were lovers, but their relationship was more than just personal. They were intellectual equals, both obsessed with the idea of pushing human potential to its absolute limits. While Tony's path led him to create the Iron Man armor, Maya's journey has led her down a different, perhaps more dangerous road. Extremis is her life's work, and it represents the next step in human evolution. She believes that Extremis has the potential to cure diseases, enhance the human body, and create a new breed of superhumans. The foundation of Extremis is nanotechnology. Unlike the bulky Iron Man armor that encases Tony's body, Extremis is designed to operate from within. The serum reprograms a person's biology at the cellular level, granting them abilities that go far beyond what any normal human could achieve. It's an attempt to create the perfect synthesis of man and machine, something that doesn't require external tools or armor. The serum, once injected, turns the recipient into a walking superweapon, capable of feats that would make even the most powerful superheroes look ordinary. But while Maya is confident in the potential for good that Extremis represents, she is also aware of the enormous risks. If this technology were to fall into the wrong hands, it could be catastrophic. And that fear becomes a reality when one of her colleagues, Dr. Aldrich Killian, makes a devastating decision. Killian, a man whose motivations are shrouded in desperation and ambition, has been working alongside Maya on the Extremis project for years. He knows the power it holds, and in a moment of weakness, he betrays everything they've worked for. Late one night, Killian, overcome by guilt and fear, accesses the lab's secure database. The facility is quiet, the hallways dimly lit, as he navigates through the security protocols. His fingers tremble as he types in the final codes, unlocking the extremist serum. He knows what he's about to do is wrong, but his desperation drives him forward. With trembling hands, he downloads the serum data and steals several doses of the formula itself. His mind races with possibilities, but also with regret. Before the sun rises, he sends an email to Maya, confessing everything: his theft, his guilt, and his fear of what might come next. And then, in a moment of ultimate despair, Killian takes his own life, leaving Maya to discover the horrifying truth the next morning. When Maya arrives at the lab the following day, the scene is grim. Killian's lifeless body slumps over his desk, and her heart sinks as she reads his email. The extremist serum, the most dangerous and advanced piece of technology they've ever developed, is now out of her control. The terrorists who now have it in their possession could use it to create a new breed of enhanced soldiers, ones that would make even the deadliest military forces on Earth look like children by comparison. Maya, frantic and terrified, knows there is only one person who can help her now. With her hands shaking, she picks up the phone and calls Tony Stark. It's a call she never thought she'd have to make, but desperate times demand desperate measures. As the phone rings, she can't help but think back to the years she spent with Tony, the times they dreamed of changing the world together. She's still trying to change the world, but now it's for all the wrong reasons. Tony is in the middle of another day at Stark Industries when he receives the call from Maya. He hears the panic in her voice immediately, and the years that have passed since they last spoke seem to disappear. She tells him about the theft, about extremists, and the catastrophic potential of the serum in the hands of those who mean to use it for violence and destruction. Tony listens carefully, his mind racing as he processes the enormity of the situation. Extremis isn't just another piece of technology. It's something that could fundamentally change the nature of warfare and human biology. If it's in the wrong hands, the consequences would be unimaginable. Despite the complicated history between them, Tony doesn't hesitate. He agrees to meet Maya in person to learn more about the situation and what can be done to stop it. As he prepares for the meeting, Tony's mind is flooded with conflicting emotions. He's always been a futurist, someone who believes in the power of technology to solve the world's problems. But Extremis represents something different. It's not just an enhancement, it's a rewriting of the human body at its most fundamental level. The potential is staggering, but so are the risks. Tony knows that the line between man and machine is already blurred for him, but Extremis threatens to erase that line entirely. Later that day, Tony arrives at Maya's research facility, a far cry from the opulent and high-tech world he's used to. The lab is utilitarian, designed for function rather than comfort, and there's an uneasy quiet that hangs over the place. As Maya greets him, Tony can see the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight of what she's been carrying since Killian's death. She leads him into her office, where they sit down to discuss the full scope of what's happened. Maya explains the nature of Extremis in detail, walking Tony through the science behind it. The serum uses a combination of nanotechnology and biotechnology to effectively rebuild the human body from the inside out. Once injected, it rewrites the subject's genetic code, granting them superhuman abilities, including enhanced strength, speed, and regenerative powers. But it's not just a simple enhancement. The subject's entire physiology is altered, making them something beyond human. The transformation is fast, and once it's complete, the subject is virtually unstoppable. Tony listens intently, absorbing the technical details, but his mind is already working on the broader implications. He knows that if Extremis were to be mass-produced, it could change the face of warfare forever. Soldiers enhanced with Extremis would be faster, stronger, and more lethal than any human could ever hope to be. And worse, these soldiers would be virtually impossible to stop. The ethical ramifications of such a technology are staggering. But there's something else gnawing at Tony's mind as he listens to Maya. As much as he recognizes the danger of extremists, he can't help but see its potential. For years, he has relied on his Iron Man armor to protect him, but the armor has always been external, something that separates Tony from the power it grants him. Extremis, on the other hand, represents a fusion of man and machine, a way to internalize that power and make it a part of his very being. The idea of becoming something more than human is tempting, even for someone as principled as Tony Stark. As they finish their conversation, Tony knows that he has no choice but to stop the terrorists who now possess extremists. The stakes are too high and the threat is too great. But even as he prepares to take action, there's a part of him that wonders what this new technology means for him personally. Could extremists be the key to overcoming his limitations as Iron Man? Could it represent the next step in his own evolution? Tony Stark's life is one of perpetual motion, both physically and mentally. Even as he stands on the edge of a new crisis, his mind is restless. After his tense meeting with Maya Hansen, the looming threat of extremists hangs over him like a storm cloud. Yet, despite the immediate danger, Tony can't help but be haunted by deeper, more personal struggles that extend far beyond his responsibilities as Iron Man. The world sees Tony Stark as the charismatic billionaire inventor, the face of Stark Industries and the man behind the Iron Man armor. But Tony's public persona hides the internal conflict that gnaws at him every day. His past as a weapons manufacturer, his role in creating the very technology that has fueled wars and destruction, weighs heavily on his conscience. No matter how many lives he saves, no matter how much good he tries to do, Tony feels as though he will never be able to atone for the harm his inventions have caused. Every time he looks at the Iron Man suit, his greatest creation, he's reminded that it exists because of the same brilliance that once designed weapons of mass destruction. As Tony leaves the research facility after his conversation with Maya, he boards his private jet, heading back to Stark Industries. The plane is sleek, cutting edge, a symbol of Tony's success and his technological genius. But as Tony sits in the plush interior, staring out of the window at the clouds below, his mind is elsewhere. He knows that he's walking a fine line, balancing between the man he was and the man he's trying to become. The guilt of his past decisions follows him everywhere, a shadow that clings to him no matter how far he tries to run. Stark Industries, once the leading arms manufacturer in the world, has undergone a transformation. Under Tony's leadership, it no longer produces weapons of war. Instead, the company is dedicated to creating clean energy solutions, medical technologies, and other advancements that serve humanity. Yet, despite this shift in focus, Tony knows that the world still views him through the lens of his past. Many people, especially those who have suffered from the weapons his company once made, will never forgive him, and Tony doesn't blame them. He understands their anger, their pain, because he feels it too. It's the same pain that drives him to be Iron Man, to use the very technology that once brought destruction to now protect and save lives. Back at his corporate headquarters, Stark Industries buzzes with activity. The towering glass building is a beacon of modern innovation, a symbol of Tony's relentless pursuit of progress. But for Tony, the office represents something more complicated. It's a reminder of both his incredible achievements and his moral failings. As he walks through the halls, employees nod and smile, but Tony barely acknowledges them. His mind is preoccupied with the information Maya shared with him, the existence of extremists, the fact that terrorists now possess the serum, and the knowledge that if they aren't stopped, the consequences will be disastrous. Once inside his office, Tony is greeted by his trusted personal assistant, Pepper Potts. Pepper is one of the few people who truly understands Tony, seeing beyond his public persona to the man underneath. She's smart, capable, and loyal, often acting as Tony's moral compass when his own judgment is clouded by his internal conflicts. Pepper hands him a tablet with the latest news and updates, but as she talks, Tony's responses are distracted, his thoughts still fixated on Extremis. Pepper notices the distant look in his eyes and asks if something is wrong. Tony brushes it off with a quick comment about being tired, but Pepper knows better. She can tell when Tony is hiding something, but she also knows that pushing him too hard will only make him retreat further into himself. Alone in his office, Tony sits down at his desk and pulls up the schematics for the Iron Man armor on his holographic display. The blueprints hover in the air before him, rotating and shifting as Tony makes subtle adjustments with the flick of his fingers. He's always working to improve the armor, to make it faster, stronger, more efficient. But as he stares at the designs, a thought nags at him. Is it enough? The Iron Man suit has its limitations. It's external, something Tony wears rather than something he is. Every time he puts it on, he's reminded of the physical separation between himself and the power he wields. And now, with Extremis in play, Tony can't help but wonder if there's a better way. A way to integrate that power directly into his body, to eliminate the need for the suit altogether. The idea of Extremis, of rewriting his biology to become something more, tempts him in ways he never expected. For years, Tony has pushed the limits of technology, using it to enhance his abilities and protect the world. But what if he could push those limits even further? What if he didn't need the Iron Man armor at all? What if he could become the technology? The thought is both thrilling and terrifying. Tony knows that Extremis represents a leap forward in human evolution, a merging of man and machine at the cellular level. But he also knows the risks. Once you cross that line, there's no going back. Would he still be Tony Stark, or would he become something else entirely? Something more machine than man? As these questions swirl in his mind, Tony is interrupted by a message from his artificial intelligence assistant, JRVIS. The smooth, calming voice of the AI informs him that there's been a development, a string of violent attacks in Texas, near the area where Maya's research facility is located. The reports are vague, but they describe a lone assailant with superhuman strength and speed, tearing through law enforcement with ease. Tony's heart sinks. He knows exactly what this means. Extremis has already been used, and the results are as catastrophic as Maya feared. Without hesitation, Tony springs into action. He orders JRVIS to prepare the Iron Man suit, and within moments, the sleek, red and gold armor begins assembling itself around his body. The familiar feeling of the suit encasing him is both reassuring and suffocating. It gives him the power he needs to face the dangers ahead, but it also serves as a constant reminder of his reliance on technology. A reminder that, no matter how advanced his armor becomes, it's still a barrier between him and the world. As Tony flies toward Texas, the wind rushing past him, he reflects on the nature of power and responsibility. For years, he's been trying to make up for the mistakes of his past, to use his genius for good instead of harm. But Extremis represents a whole new level of power, one that he's not sure anyone, himself included, should possess. He knows that if he doesn't stop the terrorists who now have the serum, they'll use it to create an unstoppable force, one that could wreak havoc on a global scale. But even as he focuses on the task at hand, a part of him can't help but wonder if Extremis could also be the key to his own evolution, a way to finally transcend the limitations of his armor and become something truly extraordinary. By the time Tony reaches the outskirts of the small Texas town where the attacks have occurred, the damage is already evident. Buildings are reduced to rubble, and the streets are littered with debris. The air is thick with the acrid smell of smoke and burning metal. Emergency responders are on the scene, but they're clearly outmatched. The assailant, whoever they are, has already left a trail of destruction in their wake. Tony scans the area, his sensors picking up traces of unusual energy signatures. It doesn't take long for him to locate the source. In the distance, a figure moves with unnatural speed, darting between the wreckage with terrifying precision. The extremist-enhanced individual is unlike anything Tony has ever seen before. Faster than a human, stronger than any soldier, and seemingly impervious to conventional attacks. As Tony prepares to engage, he feels the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He's about to face an opponent who is the embodiment of everything Extremis represents, the ultimate fusion of man and machine, with none of the limitations he faces in his armor. This is the future that Extremis promises, and Tony knows that the outcome of this battle could determine the future of humanity itself. With a deep breath, Tony steels himself and charges forward. The battle is about to begin, and the stakes have never been higher. Deep in the heart of a rundown warehouse, hidden from prying eyes, a group of men with radical, anti-government views huddled around a makeshift laboratory. These men had grown disillusioned with the system, convinced that their country had turned against its people, and they sought to fight back by any means necessary. At the center of this group was a man named Malin. He had always been angry, but now his fury had crystallized into something far more dangerous, a desire for violent revolution. Malin was no ordinary man. His life had been marked by hardship, betrayal, and bitterness. His family had been torn apart by a government raid when he was younger, an event that had festered in his mind like an open wound. That singular moment had shaped the course of his life, turning him into a man consumed by hatred for the institutions that he believed had wronged him. As the leader of a small group of extremists, Malin had big plans, and he was willing to go to any lengths to see them through. His hatred of the system was only matched by his thirst for power, and in his hands, Extremis would become the tool of his vengeance. The stolen Extremis serum, obtained through Aldrich Killian's betrayal of Maya Hansen, was now in Malin's possession. His group, having little knowledge of the serum's true potential, was eager to use it as a weapon against those they saw as enemies. They weren't scientists or military strategists. They were ideologues with a dream of tearing down the structures of power. To them, Extremis was the key to tipping the scales in their favor. What they didn't fully grasp, however, was that the serum was far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a complete biological transformation, one that could unleash uncontrollable power. Malin's eyes glinted with a dangerous resolve as he volunteered to be the first to undergo the Extremis procedure. The other men in his group had their doubts, unsure of what would happen once the serum was injected into his body. They knew that Extremis had been developed to enhance human capabilities, but they couldn't foresee just how extreme the transformation would be. Nevertheless, Malin was insistent. He had spent his entire life feeling powerless, and now, for the first time, he had the chance to take control in a way that he had never dreamed possible. In the dimly lit lab, Malin sat in a crude chair, his arms bound to prevent any involuntary movements. The other men prepared the serum, carefully loading the needle with the golden, viscous fluid that shimmered faintly under the fluorescent lights. Malin watched as the needle was brought toward his arm, a sneer on his face. He wasn't afraid, he welcomed the change. For him, this was more than just an experiment. This was his rebirth. The injection began, and almost immediately, the effects were felt. Malin's body tensed, his muscles locking as the Extremis serum coursed through his veins. His skin flushed, turning a deep red as if his blood was boiling beneath the surface. His breath came in ragged gasps, and then, all at once, his body convulsed violently. The pain was excruciating, but Malin welcomed it, seeing it as the price for the power he was about to receive. As the serum continued to spread throughout his system, the changes became more apparent. His muscles began to bulge, expanding beyond their normal limits. His skin seemed to harden, taking on a tougher, almost metallic sheen, while his bones thickened and realigned themselves to support his growing strength. The most dramatic change, however, was happening beneath the surface at a cellular level. Extremis was reprogramming Mullen's entire biology, turning him into something more than human, something faster, stronger, and far more deadly. The transformation took minutes, but it felt like hours. Mullen's screams echoed through the warehouse as his body was torn apart and rebuilt from within. His comrades watched in a mixture of horror and awe, unsure of whether the process was working or if it was killing him. At one point, it looked as though Mullen's body might simply give out, the strain too much for him to handle. But then, as suddenly as it began, the pain subsided. Mullen's body relaxed, and for a moment, everything was still. His comrades held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Slowly, Mullen opened his eyes, which now burned with a strange, unnatural light. He flexed his hands, his movements deliberate and powerful, testing the new limits of his body. The transformation was complete. As Mullen stood, he towered over the others. His frame was massive, his muscles rippling with newfound strength. But it wasn't just his physical size that had changed. There was something more dangerous about him now, something primal. His mind, once filled with rage, now felt focused and sharp, his thoughts moving faster than ever before. He could feel the power surging through him, and it was intoxicating. Every fiber of his being felt enhanced, every sense heightened. He was no longer just a man. He had become something far greater. Without a word, Mullen tested his new abilities. He moved with incredible speed, darting across the room in the blink of an eye. His comrades barely had time to react as he grabbed one of the heavy metal crates that lined the warehouse and hurled it effortlessly across the room. It smashed into the wall with such force that the entire building seemed to shake. The men stared in shock, realizing just how powerful Mullen had become. But power wasn't enough for Mullen. He wanted to use it. The transformation had only intensified his desire for revenge. He now saw himself as the instrument of destruction that would bring down the system he hated so much. His enhanced mind began formulating plans to strike at those in power, to show the world the true strength of Extremis. Mullen wasted no time. He was eager to put his new abilities to the test, and his first target was the local authorities. He and his group had been under surveillance for some time, but now Mullen welcomed the attention. He wanted to make a statement to show the world what Extremis could do. With terrifying speed and precision, Mullen launched an attack on the police force that had been monitoring his group. The officers, unprepared for what was coming, stood no chance. In the blink of an eye, Mullen was upon them. His movements were a blur, faster than any human eye could follow. He tore through the ranks of police with ease, his enhanced strength and speed making him unstoppable. Bullets ricocheted off his hardened skin, leaving him completely unharmed. The officers tried to regroup, but it was futile. Mullen was relentless, a force of nature that they had no hope of stopping. With each blow, Mullen felt his power grow. He reveled in the destruction, the chaos he was unleashing. This was what Extremis had given him, the ability to strike fear into the hearts of those who had oppressed him for so long. As the battle raged on, Mullen's comrades watched from a distance, awestruck by the sheer magnitude of his power. They had known that Extremis would change him, but they hadn't anticipated just how devastating the results would be. By the time Mullen was finished, the once quiet town was left in ruins. The police force had been decimated, their vehicles and equipment reduced to twisted wreckage. Smoke filled the air, and the streets were littered with debris. Mullen stood in the midst of the destruction, his chest heaving with exertion, but his expression was one of satisfaction. This was only the beginning. Word of the attack spread quickly, reaching both the media and law enforcement agencies across the country. The brutality of the assault, coupled with the reports of an individual exhibiting superhuman abilities, caused widespread panic. People were terrified, not only of Mullen and his group, but of the technology that had made him what he was. Extremis was no longer just a theory, it was a reality, and that reality was far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. As the authorities scrambled to respond to the crisis, one name was whispered with increasing urgency: Tony Stark. Back in his towering office at Stark Industries, Tony Stark sat alone, staring at the screens surrounding him, flooded with news reports about the attack in Texas. The devastation left behind by Mullen's rampage had shaken him. The destruction was unlike anything the authorities had faced before. Buildings were reduced to rubble, and police officers had been annihilated by a single, unstoppable force. Reports described Mullen's seemingly invulnerable body, his immense strength, and his ability to move faster than the human eye could follow. All signs pointed to one conclusion: Mullen had used the Extremis serum. The Extremis project now loomed over Tony's thoughts like a dark shadow. He could see the power it had unleashed in Mullen, transforming a man into a living weapon capable of leveling an entire town. What haunted Tony wasn't just the destruction, it was the potential of Extremis. This was far more than a new drug or technology. It was a biological transformation that rewrote the very essence of what it meant to be human. Mullen had become more than a man. He had become a force of nature, driven by rage and hatred, and there was no telling how far he would go. As Tony sat in the darkened room, the weight of responsibility pressed down on him like never before. He had always been a man who lived at the intersection of technology and ethics, creating some of the world's most advanced systems while grappling with the consequences. But Extremis represented something beyond even his own creations. It was a leap forward in human evolution, one that could have profound and far-reaching consequences, not just for the individuals who used it, but for the entire human race. Tony's mind raced. On one hand, Extremis was dangerous, far more dangerous than he had originally understood. It had already caused untold destruction, and in the hands of someone like Mullen, it could bring about even greater chaos. But on the other hand, Extremis was also the future. It offered the kind of power and potential that Tony had spent his entire life chasing. It wasn't just a weapon, it was an evolution, a way to transcend the limitations of the human body and mind. For years, Tony had pushed himself to the limits of human capability, relying on his genius and his Iron Man armor to stand toe-to-toe with the world's greatest threats. But there were always limits. He was still a man inside the suit, bound by the constraints of biology. His body could only handle so much, and no matter how advanced the armor became, it was still a tool, something external that separated him from the power it provided. Extremis, on the other hand, represented a fundamental shift. It was the power not of a machine but of the human body itself, enhanced and rewritten at the genetic level. With Extremis, Tony could transcend his own limits. He could become Iron Man in every sense of the word. But it wasn't that simple. The moral and ethical questions surrounding Extremis were immense. Maya Hansen had developed it as a means to heal the human body, to repair and regenerate tissue in ways that had once been thought impossible. But in the wrong hands, as Mullen had shown, it could become a weapon of unimaginable destruction. Tony had seen firsthand what his own inventions had done when used irresponsibly, and the thought of unleashing something as powerful as Extremis on the world terrified him. Tony paced the room, his mind filled with conflicting thoughts. On one hand, the destruction in Texas was proof of just how dangerous Extremis could be. But on the other, Tony couldn't help but wonder if Extremis might be the solution to his own problems. Over the years, he had faced countless threats: alien invasions, hostile governments, rogue AIs. And while his Iron Man armor had always been his greatest weapon, it was also his greatest weakness. It made him dependent on technology in a way that he couldn't escape. What if there was a way to internalize that power, to become the weapon himself? The temptation gnawed at him. Extremis was more than just a serum. It was a way to rewrite the rules, to become something more than human. Tony's own body had already been through hell and back. The shrapnel that had once lodged near his heart had been a constant reminder of his mortality, a ticking clock that had pushed him to develop the arc reactor to keep himself alive. Now, years later, that same body was aging, its endurance fading. He was still a brilliant inventor, but physically he was limited. Extremis could change that. It could make him stronger, faster, more resilient. He wouldn't just wear the Iron Man suit, he would become it. But with power came responsibility, and Tony had learned the hard way that even the best intentions could lead to catastrophic outcomes. He couldn't forget what Extremis had already done. Mullen's transformation was proof of how dangerous the serum could be when used recklessly. If Tony chose to inject himself with Extremis, he would be crossing a line, taking a step into uncharted territory that could have consequences far beyond himself. His thoughts were interrupted by the sudden chime of JRVIS, his loyal AI companion. The voice was calm and polite, as always, but the news it brought was anything but. Reports were coming in from the US military and intelligence agencies. Mullen was on the move again, and this time, he was heading toward a heavily populated city. The destruction he had wrought in Texas was just the beginning. Mullen's wrath was escalating, and he was determined to unleash his newfound power on a grander scale. Tony felt a surge of adrenaline. The time for reflection was over. Mullen had to be stopped, and there was no one else who could do it. The Iron Man armor had been upgraded to its most advanced iteration, but Tony knew that even with the best technology at his disposal, fighting Mullen was going to be an enormous challenge. Mullen wasn't just enhanced by technology. His very biology had been rewritten. The Extremis serum had made him something beyond human, and Tony's armor, as advanced as it was, still operated within the limits of its design. The dilemma tore at Tony's mind. Extremis was the only way to level the playing field, to stand a chance against Mullen's raw power. But the risks were enormous. If Tony injected himself with Extremis, he would be crossing a point of no return. He would be fundamentally changing who he was, not just as a hero but as a human being. And there was no guarantee that the transformation would go smoothly. Extremis was unpredictable, as Mullen's violent rampage had shown. Tony's body might not be able to handle the changes, and the serum could end up destroying him instead of empowering him. As he suited up in the Iron Man armor, Tony couldn't shake the feeling that this battle was about more than just stopping Mullen. It was about the future of humanity, the future of technology, and the choices that lay ahead. The world was on the cusp of a new era, one where the lines between man and machine were beginning to blur. Extremis was the catalyst, the tipping point that could redefine what it meant to be human. Tony took a deep breath as the helmet closed around his head, sealing him inside the familiar cocoon of the Iron Man suit. He activated his thrusters and took off into the sky, racing toward the city where Mullen was headed. His mind was still racing, weighing the pros and cons, struggling with the ethical implications of using Extremis. But in the end, he knew that he had to make a decision, and fast. Mullen had to be stopped, no matter the cost. But the question that haunted Tony as he flew into the night was this: was he willing to become the very thing he feared in order to save the world? The battle that awaited him was not just against Mullen, but against the forces of change that Extremis represented. The choices Tony made in the coming hours would not only determine the outcome of the fight, but the future of Iron Man himself. As the sun set over the small city of Bastrop, Texas, its streets were eerily quiet. But beneath that stillness, a storm was brewing. In the distance, a single figure approached, Mullen. His massive form moved with terrifying purpose, his eyes blazing with fury. The extremist serum had transformed him, giving him the strength and speed of something far beyond human. His mission was clear: bring down the symbols of power that had wronged him. He didn't care about the lives he would destroy or the chaos he would cause. In his mind, this was justified revenge. Above, high in the clouds, Tony Stark flew toward the city, the thrusters of his Iron Man armor glowing red against the darkening sky. JRVIS had tracked Mullen's movements and warned Tony that the extremist was heading toward a densely populated area. Tony's mind raced as he considered the battle that lay ahead. He had faced many powerful enemies before, but Mullen was different. Enhanced by extremists, Mullen was faster, stronger, and more dangerous than anything Tony had ever encountered. As Tony descended toward the city, his HUD flickered to life, scanning the streets for any sign of Mullen. The streets below were empty. People had been evacuated in anticipation of the attack, but the tension in the air was palpable. Tony felt it too. The Iron Man suit had never let him down before, but today, for the first time, he wasn't sure it would be enough. Extremists had made Mullen into a living weapon, and Tony knew he was about to face a force unlike any other. Suddenly, his sensors picked up movement, a blur of motion in the distance, moving at an impossible speed. Mullen. He was tearing through the streets, smashing anything in his path. Cars were overturned, lampposts ripped from the ground, and buildings shook as he passed by. Tony adjusted his course, flying in low to confront him. As he approached, he saw Mullen for the first time in person. A towering, muscular figure, his body practically glowing with raw power. His skin had taken on a strange, metallic sheen, and his movements were unnaturally fast and fluid, as though the very laws of physics no longer applied to him. Tony hovered in the air above Mullen for a moment, watching as the extremist ripped a truck apart with his bare hands. The rage in Mullen's eyes was unmistakable. This was a man consumed by hatred, driven by a singular need for vengeance. Tony opened a communication channel, hoping to reason with him, to prevent the destruction that was sure to follow. Mullen, Tony's voice boomed from the suit's external speakers. This isn't the way. You don't have to do this. Mullen stopped for a moment, turning his head toward the sky. His eyes locked onto Iron Man, a sneer forming on his lips. There was no recognition, no pause for reflection, only hatred. Without a word, Mullen leaped into the air, his massive body rocketing toward Tony with alarming speed. Tony barely had time to react. He fired his repulsors, boosting himself upward to avoid the strike. Mullen's fist passed through the space where Tony had just been, the force of the punch causing a shockwave that rattled the nearby buildings. Tony quickly recalibrated his systems. This wasn't going to be a conversation. Mullen was out for blood. Tony retaliated, firing a blast from his repulsors toward Mullen. But the extremist moved faster than Tony had anticipated. In an instant, Mullen closed the distance between them, grabbing Tony by the leg and hurling him into a nearby building with terrifying strength. Tony crashed through the walls, debris flying in all directions as he tumbled to the ground below. The impact was brutal, but the Iron Man suit absorbed most of the damage. Tony groaned, trying to regain his bearings as his systems recalibrated. Before he could fully recover, Mullen was on him again, moving with inhuman speed. He grabbed Tony by the chest plate and lifted him into the air like a rag doll. The strength in Mullen's grip was astounding, and for the first time, Tony realized just how outmatched he was in terms of raw power. Mullen's voice was low and menacing as he stared into Tony's faceplate. "You think you can stop me? You're just another tool of the system, just like the rest of them." With a roar, Mullen hurled Tony into the ground with such force that the pavement cracked beneath him. Tony's systems blared warnings as the suit absorbed the impact, but the damage was adding up. He quickly rolled to the side, avoiding a follow-up punch that would have caved in his chest plate. Mullen's fist slammed into the ground, creating a small crater where Tony had just been. Tony launched himself into the air, firing his repulsors again, this time with more precision. The blast struck Mullen square in the chest, sending him stumbling backward. But it wasn't enough to stop him. Mullen recovered almost instantly, his enhanced body shrugging off the damage as though it were nothing. As Tony flew upward, he realized he needed a new strategy. Direct confrontation wasn't working. Mullen's speed and strength were far beyond what Tony had anticipated. The extremist serum had turned him into something more than human, and Tony's usual tactics weren't going to cut it. He needed to outthink Mullen to find a way to exploit his weaknesses. Hovering above the city, Tony quickly scanned Mullen's body with his suit's sensors. The extremist serum had radically altered Mullen's biology, enhancing every aspect of his physical capabilities. But it had also made his body incredibly unstable. The heat signatures coming from Mullen's body were off the charts. His metabolism was working at an accelerated rate, and his core temperature was rising dangerously high. If Tony could push Mullen's body beyond its limits, the extremists might turn against him. With a plan forming in his mind, Tony re-engaged. He swooped down, firing a barrage of repulsor blasts at Mullen, not aiming to damage him directly but to force him to exert more energy. Mullen snarled in frustration, dodging the blasts with unnatural agility. He leaped into the air again, aiming to grab Tony out of the sky, but Tony was ready this time. He boosted upward, just out of reach, forcing Mullen to use even more energy in his pursuit. As the battle raged on, Tony's strategy began to take its toll. Mullen's movements, while still incredibly fast, were becoming less fluid. His breath was coming in ragged gasps, and his skin, once glowing with vitality, was starting to take on a sickly pallor. The extremist serum was pushing his body to its limits, and Tony knew it was only a matter of time before Mullen's metabolism burned out. But Mullen wasn't going down without a fight. With a furious roar, he launched himself at Tony with a burst of speed, catching him off guard. Mullen's fist connected with Tony's chest plate, sending him crashing into the side of a building. The impact was devastating, and Tony's HUD flickered as the suit struggled to maintain functionality. Mullen landed in front of him, breathing heavily but still standing. "You can't stop me, Stark," Mullen growled, his voice filled with venom. "I'm the future. I'm what this world needs." Tony struggled to his feet, his suit groaning under the strain. He knew he couldn't keep this up much longer, but he also knew that Mullen's body was on the verge of collapse. The extremist serum had given Mullen incredible power, but it was also destroying him from the inside out. In a final, desperate move, Tony activated the suit's uni-beam, channeling all of the suit's remaining energy into a concentrated blast of energy aimed directly at Mullen. The beam struck Mullen in the chest, sending him flying backward into the wreckage of a nearby building. The force of the blast overloaded Mullen's already strained system, pushing his body beyond its limits. As Mullen lay among the rubble, his body convulsed, the extremist serum burning through him at an uncontrollable rate. His enhanced cells, once a source of incredible strength, were now turning against him. His skin crackled with energy, and his muscles twitched violently as his body began to tear itself apart. Tony stood over him, his suit sparking and damaged but still functional. He had won the battle, but only just. Mullen's body finally gave out, collapsing into unconsciousness as the extremist burned itself out. The danger was over for now, but Tony knew that this was only the beginning. The extremist serum was out there, and its potential for destruction was terrifying. Mullen was just the first, and there would be others. In the aftermath of the battle with Mullen, Tony Stark returned to his high-tech laboratory at Stark Industries. The city was in ruins, and the sense of urgency weighed heavily on him. The fight had been fierce, and although he had succeeded in stopping Mullen, the confrontation had left Tony with more questions than answers. The extremist serum, which had so drastically transformed Mullen into a living weapon, was now at the forefront of his thoughts. He needed to understand it, and he needed to decide what to do next. The laboratory was a marvel of modern technology, filled with an array of sophisticated equipment and monitors. Tony moved with practiced precision, his mind still buzzing from the battle. He pulled up the data on extremists that he had collected and began to sift through it. The more he delved into the data, the clearer it became that extremists was not just a powerful serum, but a revolutionary technology that could fundamentally alter human physiology. Maya Hansen's work on extremists had been intended as a breakthrough in regenerative medicine, a way to heal and enhance the human body. The serum was designed to repair damaged tissues, regenerate cells, and even reprogram the body's natural processes to improve overall health and vitality. But Mullen's violent reaction to extremists had shown its darker side, a side that Tony had to understand if he was going to face future threats, or, worse, if he had to consider using the serum himself. In his lab, Tony focused on a containment chamber at the center of the room. Inside, a sample of extremists lay in a glass vial, glowing faintly with an eerie blue light. The serum was a complex concoction of nanotechnology and biochemistry, a combination that allowed it to interface directly with human cells. Its potential was immense, but so were the risks. Tony knew that to truly understand extremists, he needed to study it from every angle, including the possibility of undergoing the procedure himself. The first step in his plan was to reach out to Maya Hansen. She was the creator of extremists and had been a key figure in its development. Tony had to learn more about its effects and, crucially, its safety. Maya had been working with extremists for years, and her insights would be invaluable in understanding the serum's potential and dangers. He contacted her through a secure channel, and she agreed to meet him at Stark Industries. Later that day, Maya arrived at the lab, her demeanor tense. She had been watching the news and knew about the destruction caused by Mullen. The stakes were high, and she understood that Tony was serious about understanding extremists. Maya was a brilliant scientist, but she was also deeply conflicted. The potential of extremists was enormous, but she had seen firsthand how it could go wrong. Tony greeted Maya and led her to the containment chamber, where the extremist sample was displayed. He had already begun his own analysis but needed her expert perspective. As they examined the serum together, Maya explained its core components. Extremis was a combination of advanced nanotechnology and biological agents, designed to interact with the body at a cellular level. The nanobots were programmed to repair and enhance cells, essentially allowing the body to heal itself and even adapt to new physical conditions. Maya also revealed that extremists worked by rewriting the genetic code of the recipient, a process that required precise control. If the nanobots malfunctioned or if the serum was not administered correctly, the results could be catastrophic. Mullen's transformation had been an extreme case of what could go wrong. His body had rejected the serum's modifications, leading to violent reactions and ultimately, his collapse. Tony listened intently, absorbing every detail. He knew that understanding extremists was crucial, not only for his own potential use of the serum, but also for ensuring that it didn't fall into the wrong hands. Maya continued, explaining that while Extremis had the potential to grant extraordinary abilities, it also had risks that could alter or even destroy a person's body if not carefully monitored. As they discussed the finer points of the serum, Tony's thoughts turned to his own situation. He was no stranger to pushing the boundaries of technology and human capability. The Iron Man suit had been his greatest achievement, but it was still just a tool, an external enhancement. Extremis offered something different, a way to enhance himself from within to become something more than human. The idea was tempting, but Tony had seen the consequences of unchecked ambition. He needed to be certain that if he chose to undergo the procedure, he would be prepared for whatever came next. Maya's words resonated with him as she emphasized the importance of careful consideration and preparation. She described the procedure required for administering Extremis, detailing the steps involved and the necessary precautions. The serum would need to be injected into the bloodstream, where it would then disperse throughout the body, targeting cells for enhancement and repair. The process was designed to be gradual, allowing the nanobots to integrate with the recipient's biological systems. However, Maya warned Tony of the possible side effects. The serum could induce severe pain, fever, and nausea as the body adjusted to the new changes. The most dangerous side effect was the risk of the body rejecting the serum, leading to severe complications or even death. The Extremis procedure required not only physical readiness but also mental resilience, as the process could be intensely traumatic. Tony's mind raced with possibilities and risks. The decision to undergo the Extremis procedure was not one to be taken lightly. It could potentially grant him powers and abilities beyond anything he had ever known, but it also carried immense risks. The balance between power and danger was delicate, and Tony had to weigh his options carefully. Determined to move forward with caution, Tony decided to perform a series of tests on himself before committing to the Extremis procedure. He wanted to ensure that his body and mind were prepared for the strain of the transformation. He conducted extensive diagnostic tests, measuring his physical and mental state, and began preparations for a controlled trial of the Extremis serum. In the days that followed, Tony's lab became a hub of activity. He worked closely with Maya, running simulations and tests to understand how Extremis would interact with his own biological systems. The lab was filled with a sense of urgency as Tony and Maya collaborated to ensure that every precaution was taken. Tony also took the time to reflect on the broader implications of Extremis. The serum had the potential to change the world, but it also had the power to destroy it. He knew that he needed to approach the procedure with the utmost care, understanding that the choices he made could have far-reaching consequences. As the preparations continued, Tony faced a moment of reckoning. He had always been driven by the desire to push the boundaries of technology and human capability, but Extremis represented a fundamental shift. It was a step into the unknown, a leap into a new era of human evolution. The decision to embrace it was one that would define his future, and he had to be ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. With Maya's guidance and his own determination, Tony moved forward with the Extremis procedure, ready to face the unknown and discover what lay beyond the limits of human potential. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but Tony was prepared to confront it head-on, knowing that the choices he made would shape the future of Iron Man and the world itself. In the high-tech confines of his laboratory, Tony Stark was on the brink of a revolutionary transformation. After extensive preparations and consultations with Maya Hansen, he had decided to proceed with the Extremis procedure. The decision was not taken lightly. Tony understood that this was a monumental step, one that would fundamentally alter his existence. The Extremis serum, with its potential to enhance human abilities and regenerate the body, was a gamble with profound consequences. The lab was abuzz with activity as Tony and Maya prepared for the procedure. Diagnostic equipment hummed and screens displayed real-time data as Tony underwent final health checks. His suit was carefully removed, revealing his unprotected body, vulnerable yet resolute. Maya reviewed the data with focused intensity, ensuring that every aspect of the procedure was meticulously planned. The extremis serum, contained in a sterile vial, was prepared for injection. Its glow seemed to pulse with the promise of transformation. The serum's nanobots, a sophisticated network of microscopic machines, were designed to interact with the human body on a cellular level. Tony watched as Maya carefully drew the serum into a syringe, her hands steady despite the gravity of the moment. With a final, reassuring glance from Maya, Tony braced himself for the injection. The needle pierced his skin, and the serum was introduced into his bloodstream. A cold sensation spread through his veins as the extremis began its work. The nanobots started their task of repairing and enhancing Tony's cells, interfacing with his biological systems in a way that was both awe-inspiring and unsettling. The initial effects of the serum were immediate. Tony felt a series of strange sensations as the extremis took hold. His body temperature rose, and he experienced a rush of heat that left him sweating and uncomfortable. The lab's temperature controls struggled to keep up with the heat emanating from his body. Maya observed closely, monitoring Tony's vitals and ensuring that the serum was interacting as intended. As the extremis serum continued its work, Tony began to experience a range of symptoms. His muscles twitched and spasmed as the nanobots rewrote his genetic code. He felt waves of pain, accompanied by periods of intense euphoria, as his body adapted to the changes. The process was excruciating, but Tony's resolve remained unshaken. He understood that this was a necessary part of the transformation. Hours passed, and the pain gradually subsided, replaced by a sense of heightened awareness. Tony's senses were sharper, his reflexes faster, and his strength significantly increased. The extremis serum had begun to work its magic, and Tony could feel the changes manifesting in every fiber of his being. Maya's role was crucial in this stage of the procedure. She continued to monitor Tony's condition, providing support and adjusting the process as needed. The serum's effects were profound, and Maya had to ensure that Tony's body was responding positively. The lab became a sanctuary of scientific inquiry and medical expertise, with Maya's guidance helping Tony navigate the complexities of his transformation. As the extremis serum completed its initial phase, Tony's appearance began to change. His skin took on a new, more resilient texture, and his physical form became more defined. The nanobots had not only enhanced his strength and agility, but had also made his body more resistant to damage. Tony felt a newfound sense of control over his own physiology, as though he could push his body to limits he had never imagined. The next phase of Tony's evolution involved testing and acclimatization. With Maya's assistance, Tony began to experiment with his new abilities. The extremis enhanced Iron Man suit was designed to integrate seamlessly with his newly modified physiology. Tony donned the suit, which had been upgraded to accommodate the changes brought about by the serum. The fusion of extremis and the Iron Man suit created a synergy that enhanced Tony's capabilities even further. Tony tested the suit's new features, marveling at the advancements. The extremis enhanced suit allowed for more precise control and greater efficiency in its functions. Tony's strength and agility were amplified, enabling him to perform feats that had previously been beyond his reach. The suit systems were also more responsive, adapting to Tony's enhanced physical state and providing him with real-time feedback on his performance. As Tony adapted to his new abilities, he began to explore the potential applications of extremis. The serum had opened up new possibilities for both his personal and professional life. He envisioned a future where the extremist technology could revolutionize not only his own capabilities but also the world at large. The potential for medical advancements, improved human performance, and even the creation of new technologies was immense. However, with these possibilities came new challenges. The extremist serum had introduced a level of unpredictability and risk that Tony had to manage. He was acutely aware of the dangers associated with the serum, especially after witnessing Mullen's violent reaction. Tony was determined to use his newfound abilities responsibly and to ensure that extremists did not become a tool for destruction. As days turned into weeks, Tony continued to refine his understanding of extremists and its effects. He conducted a series of experiments and simulations to test the limits of his new abilities. The lab was filled with a sense of discovery and innovation as Tony explored the full range of possibilities offered by the extremist-enhanced Iron Man suit. The transformation had not only altered Tony's physical capabilities, but had also given him a new perspective on his role as Iron Man. He had always been driven by a desire to push the boundaries of technology, but extremists had expanded those boundaries in ways he had never imagined. The serum had given him a deeper understanding of his own potential and the responsibilities that came with it. In the quiet moments of reflection, Tony pondered the broader implications of his evolution. Extremists had the power to change the course of human history, and he had to navigate its potential with care. The technology was both a blessing and a curse, offering incredible advancements while also posing significant risks. Tony knew that he had to remain vigilant and responsible, ensuring that extremis was used for the greater good and not for personal gain or destructive purposes. As the chapter of his life marked by extremists drew to a close, Tony Stark stood at the forefront of a new era. His evolution as Iron Man was complete, and he was ready to face the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. The extremist serum had transformed him in ways he had never imagined, but it had also reinforced his commitment to using his abilities for the betterment of humanity. With his new powers and insights, Tony was prepared to take on the next phase of his journey as Iron Man. The world had changed, and so had he. The future was uncertain, but Tony Stark was ready to embrace it with the determination and ingenuity that had always defined him. The city lay in ruins beneath a dark, stormy sky as Iron Man prepared for the final confrontation with Mullen. The battle had taken a personal turn, and Tony Stark knew that this was not just a fight for survival, but a pivotal moment that would determine the future of extremists and its potential for both good and evil. Tony Stark, now fully equipped with his extremist-enhanced Iron Man suit, stood on the edge of a devastated area of the city. His suit, reflecting the chaos around him, was sleek and powerful, its design having been optimized to take full advantage of the enhancements granted by extremists. The suit's systems hummed with energy, its sensors scanning for any sign of Mullen. Mullen, the man whose misuse of extremists had caused so much destruction, was a formidable opponent. His body had been altered into a near-invincible state, his strength and resilience magnified by the same serum that Tony had now integrated into his own physiology. The city had become a battleground, with debris scattered across the landscape, the air thick with smoke and the remnants of previous conflicts. Tony's HUD displayed a heat signature, pinpointing Mullen's location. Mullen was not hiding. Instead, he was making a dramatic statement by wreaking havoc on the remaining infrastructure, demonstrating his overwhelming power and his disdain for the chaos he had unleashed. The scene was one of apocalyptic destruction, with buildings crumbling and fires burning uncontrollably. Iron Man took to the skies, soaring above the city with the agility and speed that extremists had afforded him. His suit's thrusters roared as he gained altitude, his sensors locked onto Mullen's position. The view from above revealed the scale of the devastation. Whole sections of the city lay in ruins, and the remnants of emergency services struggled to contain the damage. As Tony approached Malin, the antagonist stood amidst the wreckage, his body radiating a sinister glow. Malin's extremist transformation had rendered him a living weapon, his physical form imposing and nearly invulnerable. His eyes burned with a fierce intensity, reflecting the turmoil and rage that drove him. Iron Man landed with a resounding thud, creating a shockwave that shook the surrounding debris. The ground cracked beneath his feet, and Malin turned to face him, his expression a mixture of contempt and anticipation. The confrontation was inevitable, and both combatants understood the stakes of this final battle. Without hesitation, Malin charged at Iron Man with incredible speed, his strength allowing him to shatter concrete with each step. Tony activated his suit's defensive systems, raising an energy shield just in time to absorb Malin's initial onslaught. The impact sent shockwaves through Iron Man's suit, but Tony was prepared. He countered with a barrage of repulsor blasts, each shot aimed with precision. The energy blasts collided with Malin, but his enhanced physiology allowed him to withstand the assault with minimal damage. He retaliated with a series of powerful strikes, his fists crashing into Iron Man's shield and causing the suit to shudder under the force of the blows. Tony's suit was designed to handle high levels of impact, but Malin's strength was on an entirely different level. Iron Man maneuvered through the air, using his agility to avoid Malin's direct attacks. The battle was a high-speed dance of offense and defense, with both combatants leveraging their enhanced abilities. Tony's extremist enhanced suit allowed him to perform feats of extraordinary speed and reflexes, but Malin's raw power and resilience made him a nearly unstoppable force. The fight raged on, with Iron Man unleashing a variety of weapons from his suit. Missiles and energy beams were fired at Malin, but the antagonist's regenerative capabilities allowed him to recover quickly from the damage. Malin's attacks were relentless, each strike aimed at exploiting any weakness in Iron Man's defenses. In the midst of the battle, Tony realized that he needed to adapt his strategy. He began using the suit's advanced targeting systems to analyze Malin's movements and predict his next moves. The data provided him with a clearer picture of Malin's attack patterns, allowing Tony to counter more effectively. Malin, aware of Tony's increasing effectiveness, intensified his assault. He unleashed a wave of energy that disrupted Iron Man's suit systems, causing temporary malfunctions. Tony struggled to regain control, his suit flickering with erratic energy patterns. In this vulnerable moment, Malin pressed his advantage, launching a devastating series of attacks. Iron Man, now facing the full force of Malin's fury, had to rely on his ingenuity and resilience. He activated a special EMP pulse within the suit, aimed at disrupting Malin's regenerative nanobots. The pulse was a gamble, as it risked affecting both combatants, but Tony hoped it would give him a crucial edge. The EMP pulse discharged, and Malin staggered as the energy wave disrupted his nanobots. For a brief moment, he was vulnerable. Iron Man seized the opportunity and unleashed a concentrated repulsor blast, aimed directly at Malin's core. The energy surged through the air, striking Malin with a force that sent him crashing into a nearby building. Tony watched as Malin struggled to rise, the blast having taken a toll on his enhanced form. The moment of vulnerability was fleeting, but it gave Iron Man a critical advantage. Tony approached cautiously, his suit's sensors alert for any sign of a counterattack. Malin, battered but not defeated, roared in defiance. He charged once more, his strength and fury undiminished. The battle continued with renewed intensity, each combatant pushing their abilities to the limit. Iron Man's suit, now fully operational, countered with a combination of repulsor blasts, missile strikes, and close-quarters combat techniques. As the fight reached its climax, Tony knew that he had to end it decisively. He initiated a final, all-out assault, using every weapon and capability at his disposal. The Extremis enhanced Iron Man suit was pushed to its limits, its energy reserves depleting rapidly. Tony's focus was unwavering, his determination to protect the city and defeat Mullen driving him forward. In a dramatic final exchange, Iron Man unleashed a massive energy beam from his chest repulsor, channeling all available power into a single, concentrated attack. The beam cut through the air, striking Mullen with overwhelming force. The impact was catastrophic, and Mullen's body was engulfed in a blinding explosion of energy. The explosion created a shockwave that reverberated through the city, sending debris flying and shaking the ground. As the dust settled, Tony surveyed the aftermath. Mullen lay defeated, his body scorched and battered by the final, decisive blow. The city, though scarred by the battle, was safe once more. Iron Man landed beside the wreckage, his suit systems running critical diagnostics. The battle had taken its toll on him as well, but Tony's resolve remained unshaken. He had faced a formidable foe and emerged victorious, but the cost of the battle was evident in the destruction that surrounded him. In the quiet that followed the confrontation, Tony reflected on the events that had transpired. The Extremis technology, once a tool for healing and enhancement, had been wielded in ways that demonstrated its potential for both good and evil. The final battle with Mullen had shown the extremes of what Extremis could achieve, and Tony knew that he had to use this knowledge to guide his future actions. As emergency services arrived on the scene and began the arduous task of restoring order, Iron Man took a moment to contemplate the future. The city would recover, and Tony would continue his mission as Iron Man, driven by a renewed sense of purpose. The final battle had been a test of his strength, his resolve, and his commitment to protecting the world from threats like Mullen and the Extremis technology. With the immediate danger behind him, Tony Stark prepared for the next chapter of his journey. The world had changed, and so had he. The Extremis experience had transformed him both physically and mentally, and he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The future was uncertain, but Iron Man was prepared to embrace it with the determination and ingenuity that had always defined him.